The story of Rajesh and the three misfortunes. In the kingdom of Rajpura, there lived an elderly merchant named Rajesh. He had lived a long and prosperous life, gaining wealth and respect through years of hard work. However, as he grew older, he began to face certain difficulties that made him realize how fragile life could be. One day, Rajesh gathered his family and friends in his home to share his wisdom, for he had learned many lessons throughout his life. As he sat in the comfort of his study, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, he shared a piece of advice that had been passed down through generations. There are three misfortunes that a man must avoid at all costs, for they lead to misery and despair. A man who encounters these misfortunes is truly unfortunate, he began, his voice steady and thoughtful. These three are, the death of a wife in one's old age, the entrusting of one's money into the hands of relatives, and depending upon others for food. The children and grandchildren looked at him in confusion, eager to understand the meaning behind his words. Rajesh, seeing their puzzled expressions, decided to tell them a story from his own life that would help them understand the weight of these misfortunes. The first misfortune, the death of a wife in old age. Rajesh began, many years ago, when I was in my prime, I married a beautiful and kind woman named Leela. She was my soulmate, my companion in every joy and sorrow. We built a life together, raising children, managing our household, and supporting one another through thick and thin. But, as time passed, I grew older, and Leela, too, began to age. She had always been my support, my rock, and I could not imagine life without her. But one fateful day, my dear Leela fell ill. Despite all the efforts of the best doctors in the kingdom, she passed away. I was left alone, in my old age, with no one to care for me, no one to share my memories with. The pain of losing her was unbearable, and I realized that I had relied too much on her throughout our lives, taking her presence for granted. The death of a wife in one's old age is a terrible misfortune, for when you are elderly, you are often weak and vulnerable, and losing the person who had been your constant support can leave you helpless and sorrowful. He paused for a moment, his heart heavy with the memory of his late wife, before continuing. The second misfortune, entrusting money to relatives. After Leela's passing, I was left with a great deal of wealth, having built it up over many years of hard work. As I grew frail and my health declined, I began to trust my relatives, thinking that they would take care of my affairs in my old age. I entrusted my savings to my nephews, nieces, and cousins, believing that they would manage it wisely and ensure my comfort in the years to come. But, alas, I was wrong. My relatives, instead of using the money wisely, squandered it on their own pleasures, leaving me with nothing. I found myself penniless, unable to even buy the necessities of life. The lesson I learned was harsh: the only person you can truly rely on for your financial security is yourself. Entrusting money to others, no matter how much you love or trust them, is a gamble, for people often act out of their own self-interest. He looked at his children, hoping they would understand the gravity of this lesson. Guard your wealth wisely, and never place it completely in the hands of others. Trust, yes, but always keep an eye on your own well-being. The third misfortune, depending on others for food. Rajesh's tone grew even more serious as he shared the final misfortune. In the last years of my life, after the loss of my wife and the squandering of my wealth, I was forced to depend on the charity of others for my sustenance. At first, I sought help from friends, but soon it became clear that they, too, had their own struggles. I had to beg for food, relying on the kindness of strangers. This experience humbled me, but it also made me realize the deep misery of depending on others for the most basic of needs. When you depend on others for food, you lose your dignity, your independence. It is a cruel misfortune, for it strips away your self-respect. You are at the mercy of others' generosity, and when the generosity runs out, you are left with nothing. No man should ever have to endure such a fate, and no person should live in such a way that they rely on others to meet their basic needs. Rajesh's voice grew soft as he finished his story. These three misfortunes, losing a wife in old age, entrusting your wealth to relatives, and depending on others for food, are the heaviest burdens one can bear. They lead to a life of loneliness, regret, and dependence. My children, remember this: protect your relationships, guard your wealth, and strive for independence, for these are the keys to a life of peace and dignity. The room was quiet as Rajesh's words sank in. His children and grandchildren, having heard the depth of his experience, promised to live their lives with wisdom and care. They understood now that the foundation of a good life rested on maintaining strong relationships, being prudent with their resources, and ensuring that they could stand on their own. And so, Rajesh's wisdom was passed down through generations, helping his family avoid the misfortunes that had befallen him in his later years. He lived out the remainder of his life in peace, surrounded by loved ones who cherished him and cared for him in his old age, unlike the lonely, vulnerable days he had once faced. In the end, King Rajan's teachings about the three misfortunes became a lesson for many. A man is truly unfortunate when he faces the death of his wife in his old age, entrusts his money to others, and depends on others for food. Thanks for watching. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to give it a like, share it with others who might benefit, and subscribe to the channel for more valuable content like this. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.